Welcome. I'm Ally Isom, Republican candidate for the United States Senate, and I have been looking forward to this conversation for weeks. Today, we've gathered some old friends and some new ones to kick off a series of conversations our campaign will be sponsoring for the next several weeks. And in these conversations, we are talking about some challenges that I want to tackle as Utah's next senator, and the principles that I've outlined in my policy initiative entitled The Right Things, A Compact with Utah and a Vision for America. And because I believe better communication equals better representation, I feel very strongly about that. So we've gathered some of these experts from the state of Utah who know a lot about communication. And that's the flow of information between people and our government. And I'm really excited to hear their thoughts today. So let me first welcome Claudia Nakano, who is the former director of the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs. She has extensive experience in public policy and public communication with diverse audiences in particular. Jeanette Bennet is a journalist, founder, and editor-in-chief at Bennet Communications, where she focuses her time and pen on Utah Valley Magazine, Business Q Magazine, and Prosper Magazine. We also are joined by Paul Raleigh, who's a retired columnist with the Salt Lake Tribune, who I miss so much in the public square. He previously covered nearly every beat at the paper. He spent some time as an editor as well, and he's a fanatic Ute fan. We also have with us Dr. Laurie Wilson, emeritus professor with the BYU School of Communication. She was its first female chair, and she's a dear family friend of the Isoms and a mentor for countless BYU graduates who are now professional communicators.
And a fanatic BYU fan.
Yeah, and a fanatic Cougar fan. We had to have balance here. We also have Ken Verdoia, who's currently a communications consultant. You might recognize him as a former respected journalist, a documentary filmmaker, and a storyteller with PBS. And not last or least, we have Leigh Gibson, who's a former journalist and now vice president of Intrepid. It's a Salt Lake public relations, marketing, and communication firm. And they have a national reputation for helping clients effectively share their stories, particularly during crises. So thank you all so very much for joining us today. I'm so honored. Let's jump in. And we all know that this is a time of information overload in our world. From the pandemic to the economy to politics, there's really no shortage of information, data, reports, opinions, tweets, text alerts. And I don't know about you, but during the day, my phone feels like it's blowing up. There's so much information, and it's also hard to distill it down, just to process it, but even to know what to believe, what's truth. And this kind of chaos can make a person feel more distant. And if there's a consistent theme that I'm hearing across the state of Utah, it's that too many of us feel unseen and unheard and unvalued in the process. And I, as an elected official, I want to change that. I think it has to change, because when people feel unseen and unheard, the emotion goes up and we stop getting to solutions and we start getting so tense. So let's just start with some fundamentals. Talk to me about what's happening in the world right now when it comes to the average person's consumption of information. What's happening on our planet right now? Jeanette, let's go to you first.
Well, I think, like you said, we're consuming more information, more news than ever before. And that's a good thing in a lot of ways. But my biggest concern right now is that we are self-selecting the voices that we're listening to, which are echoes of our own opinions, and we tend to silence, mute, unfollow people who don't agree with us or make us uncomfortable. And so I think that's a significant challenge, to find a way to communicate with people who aren't opting into the Republican Party or to even your lane in the Republican Party. I think that is a challenge. But I think people do seek connection. They want information with a dose of personality, I feel like, which I think you're so great at, having some kindness and vulnerability and personality. I think that's needed. And that kind of goes against the journalism that I was taught, which was very black and white and a little bit cold. But I think now we're seeking a little bit more of a face to our news and our information.
Yeah, thank you. Ken, let me ask you, you've been watching news trends over the years. What are some of the biggest changes you see in the way stories are reported in the last 20 years?
Well, even beyond 20 years, if you go back 50 years, 60 years in time, in 1960, the average television news soundbite, that content that would be used as an interview in a television newscast, the average was 60 seconds in length. So if you saw Richard Nixon and John Kennedy running for president in 1960, and they were speaking on the CBS Evening News, you would generally ascribe to that segment about 60 seconds of hearing Kennedy unedited and 60 seconds of Nixon unedited. By 1992, that total soundbite length had dropped from 60 seconds to 9.1 seconds. And now,
Wow.
besides blowing up the whole notion of a deep dive, we've also exploded the resources that are available. Once upon a time, in my lifetime, the number of resources for information were defined very narrowly.
Yeah.
Now they are exponentially expanded. And people, as has been pointed out, are picking and choosing like it's some type of endless buffet. And what they're doing is gravitating to their personal desires. If they're a vegan, they're staying away from the meat side. If they have a sweet tooth like I do, they make straight for the desserts. And they stay in the, as I look at the systemic, if you will, issues we're facing in the United States, shorter attention spans, less deep dives, and more diversity to distract us.
Some terrific points there. Paul, is your microphone working now? Talk to us about what you've seen in the storytelling then. As Ken's pointed out, resources are less and newspapers have changed, and the Tribune has changed dramatically since you first started writing for it. What has that done to local storytelling and reporting?
Well, it's been devastating, to be honest with you. I mean, the Tribune and the Deseret News, we're talking about the local news, and then nationally, you've got the New York Times and Washington Post that still do a great job. But as was pointed out by your other guests, everybody seems to go into their own echo chamber, and we've reached a point where instead of like the traditional news services that we used to have, and I mean, I'm still a big believer in that, and the newsrooms that are staffed with people who went through journalism school and learned the principles and the ethics of journalism is still there, but financially, those newsrooms just don't have the resources that they used to have, and it's so as Ken said a few minutes ago, when talking about the electronic media, the sound bites have gotten smaller and smaller, and then in the newspapers, the news holes have gotten smaller and smaller, and in the meantime, I've always said that if you're someone who consumes your information by watching Fox News or similar right-wing media, and the other person consumes their news from MSNBC, you live in two different worlds. You live in two different realities. Your realities don't mesh at all, because those two organizations have their own agendas, and they have guests on that agree with the hosts, and it's an echo chamber, and you never hear the other side. I mean, you've got people. There's a big percentage of people in this country that they can look at the film of the violent attack on our Capitol and believe that it's just a normal tourist day at the office. So the environment right now is real toxic, and it's hard, and then of course you've got the media is under attack all the time. The rise of fake media and all that. I've always believed that that's a way to discredit the media, so you can say what you want, and if the media tells the truth and it's contrary to what you want, you've already discredited them. So the people who want to believe you then just don't pay attention to the facts. So you've got all those problems right now that has been really difficult to get, real information out and clarity, as you say,
Yes.
out to the public. And part of that is the public has got to the point where they don't want to hear it anyway. They want to listen to what they want to listen to.
Yeah, there's some great points there. So Claudia, this makes me think about your work with the Office of Multicultural Affairs and the challenge of bringing so many diverse voices to the table. When we have this kind of environment, do some voices get left out or filtered or diluted? What are the challenges that you see for diverse populations in our state and making sure they have a chance to feel heard?
I think all of the above, those that you just mentioned, Ally. The diverse population has always been striving to be heard and have mostly felt that they have not been listened to. And I think one of the difficulties, and I agree with what everybody has been saying, not only do we have a number of media outlets, but because of technology, and it advances every day almost. As a former communications person, I've thought about this several times when, you send out a press release, you do a media conference, you wait for the 5 o'clock news or whatever time it is, and that's when that news will come out. Well, there's somehow this information that jumps ahead, and it's streamed and it's out there before, it can be actually announced on any media, on a station, through the newsprint. But I think the multicultural community gets caught up in that as well. And not only did they feel not heard before, but I think that this advancement also sometimes is a detriment. And I say that only because I think about those people that are migrating in, and their voices mostly are not heard because a lot of them do not speak English. It's their second language. They come in, they try to learn English. Usually it's their kids that go to school and learn English before their parents. And so I think that is also where in the multicultural community that their voices are not heard through media or through any other outlet.
Yeah. So I can't help but think as I contemplate public service, and I want to ensure that what I'm thinking about and what I want people to hear is reaches the public undiluted, unfiltered, undelayed, through somebody else's lens or processes. It strikes me as such an enormous, fundamental challenge to democracy itself. How do we ensure we have meaningful dialogue that's not in sound bites and snippets, that's actually the deep dives that we need to get to really good, durable public policy? And what are some of the guiding principles that we could think about as we try to communicate? And I'm not just thinking about somebody in Washington, D.C. communicating back to people in Utah, but people in Utah communicating with Washington, D.C. Are there some guiding principles that can help that information flow? And Dr. Wilson and Laurie and Leigh, I'd love to pick your brains on this front. Are there timeless principles for communication that we just need to get back to some fundamentals, or do you see there's a shift in how we need to approach some of this?
Do you want me or Leigh to answer?
Laurie, you go first.
Okay. As everyone was talking, I'm sitting here nodding my head, but being the academic, my mind goes back to theory. What you're talking about is selective perception. People select to perceive the messages that they want to pay attention to, but they also select to perceive the channels. And we have become increasingly divided, and like has been observed, if you agree with the far right wing of the Republican Party, those are the voices that you listen to, and you don't listen to any other Republican voice. It's the ones on the far right wing. There aren't really very many mainstream voices anymore. It is complicated by social media. I think we're naive if we think that people get their news from the news media. They don't. They get it from their opinion leaders. They get it from the voices that they choose to pay attention to. Most people don't even watch the nightly news anymore. Most people don't read a newspaper anymore. And if they do read a newspaper, they read it, as was observed before, by the snippets that are streamed onto their mobile device. And those are the stories that they get. And how are those selected? Well, those are selected because of the ones they paid attention to before. So the engines that drive our technology are tailoring what we see in our technology to what we have looked at before. So it just complicates the problem. And the soundbite has become misleading. You know, you talk about a deep dive. The majority of Americans don't want a deep dive. And so when people talk about legislation on the right to vote, well, who's going to be opposed to that? Because they don't understand, there's no deep dive. They don't understand what the bills contain, and they're not going to take the time to do that. They're going to listen to those opinion leader voices. So if you want to get to people, you've got to find a way to do it through opinion leaders in the channels that they are choosing to perceive. And otherwise you're not going to get to them. And if those opinion leaders then understand the deep dive into the issues, then they will sway the masses in their respective areas. But there's also so much misinformation, and people who post the misinformation don't want to hear it. There was somebody in my ward the other day that reposted something that she got from right-wing social media about the pandemic being a hoax and vaccinations being a hoax, because the White House wasn't vaccinated, and she went on and on with the companies that weren't vaccinated that were critical. And I sent her information that showed that what she had reposted on social media was about 3 years old or 2 years old, and it was no longer true. And she removed the post, but she hasn't changed her attitude. She hasn't changed her opinion, because she's listening to the voices that are saying vaccinations are bad and the whole thing is a hoax.
So I start to feel a little bit hopeless, or I start to think, I feel like I'm going to have to be Gumby across all these different platforms and channels to try to.
No, you're not going to
reach.
have to be. You're not going to have to be. You're going to have to find people who will represent you in those areas who are opinion leaders.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, I think technology is a great thing in the sense that, you know, we could reach a lot of people in a lot of different ways, but it's also really challenging in that our attention spans are getting smaller and smaller. We're finding with the clients is getting harder and harder to reach people, especially because of that, like selective perception and things. And so I think what's important for our like politicians and things is to realize you can't just go to one place and communicate in that one place. You need to communicate everywhere. You've got to work with other opinion leaders to help get that message across as well. And also it's really important, as on the flip side of not just putting your message out, but from listening to constituents. You can't just listen to one place, because the audience on Twitter has a very different take on things than your Instagram audience or the people calling your hotline to talk to you face to face. So like I said, technology is this huge blessing, but it's a curse at the same time, because it is putting us in those echo chambers, and people are going to turn that off. And so, you know, I'd love to tell you to be Gumby, and I wish you could, but, you know, have a strong team and get your message across as much as you can, but realize you've got to get it out short because people aren't going to take that deep dive.
That's
And
it.
she's absolutely right. You need to be in all of those different channels, but it's not you that needs to be there, because they're not going to listen to you either, Ally. They're going to listen to people they trust. They're going to listen to people they trust. And so you've got to find opinion leaders in all of those channels that will get your message out for you, in support of you. And because those are the people they're going to listen to.
Well, on top of that as well, we're finding more, like, believe me, I came from journalism. I love making sure that stories from my clients get told through journalism, but now we're finding that telling our own stories in an authentic way helps get our messages across better, because people can read if you're just spewing out like propaganda and things like that. If you're telling your story and being authentic, people understand that and hear that. And that's what's more shared, and that's what people engage with. They don't want to engage with just someone spouting things off to them. They want to connect with people who are authentic.
It sounds to me like our steady stream of fast food finally got to us a little bit, and we're finally ready to like get real again and be real. Ken, you wanted to add something?
Well, there's so much good thought going on in this chain, and I don't want to blow it up, but I do want to say something that I think is very important, and something I've seen in you, Ally. Great communicators that I've worked with, not only as a journalist, but now that I'm in a communication consulting role. Great communicators begin from a premise of being very good listeners. They understand the concerns of a constituency, whether it's their staff in a large healthcare setting, whether it's how you choose to define who your constituents are. Who you listen to is almost as important as who you talk to when you begin this process of building a strong communication ethic. And the fact that you would invest the earliest weeks of your campaign in listening to Utah is an extraordinarily powerful sign of how you intend to communicate a message going forward. But let me say this, once elected, who does the office holder listen to? Do they truly listen to the constituency, or do they come back only every 5.5 years to nod at them and say, oh, I need you now too, and I also need your money?
Yeah.
Who do you listen to? Who has your ear?
Yeah.
That's a critical element of how effective you are as a communicator. And if your goal is to communicate through a broad-based media, then you start channeling your message to attract that media's interest, to give you the high-profile placement. That's the constituency you're defining. If you talk about how you're going to communicate to the people of the state of Utah has been outlined here, there are a dozen ways you can effectively get your message out and then reshared and expanded and validated by people in the neighborhoods and communities to extend the reach of that message.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, Ken. And Ken's referring to what we call the Walk a Mile event. I pledged to walk a mile in my red tennis shoes in every Utah community. So far, we've been to 73 Utah communities. I'm walking with local leaders and Main Street business people, parents and teachers and ranchers and entrepreneurs, and really getting a sense of what's in the hearts and minds of Utah. And those conversations are actually what's informed my policy initiative. It's meant to reflect back that I've heard them and I can see what's important to them, and here are the things I want to prioritize. So I am earnest in trying to do this, but I am admittedly feeling a little overwhelmed because I'm sitting here thinking I'm going to have to hire a big old communication team to be able to get to people, and that just doesn't feel real either to me. Like, how do you maintain authenticity when you've got a variety of platforms? And to Lee's point about audiences being different across platforms, even and needing to tailor it, a woman has to sleep occasionally. So how do I get all of that done? Jeanette, do you have some thoughts about that? How do you remain authentic across different platforms?
That's challenging. And the thing is, you don't want to seem 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different people across the platforms. You know, you want to be you. I love the Walk a Mile initiative. I've loved following that. But like you said, there's more that could be done with that. Like I would love to see it feel a little bit more like Humans of New York, you know, where we get a little bit more of the person's story. And you're doing that, but like in a perfect world, if you had a staff to help you, I would love for that to become a repository. These are the stories of Utah, you know, that we could refer to. One of my thoughts is just, and this is something I'm learning myself, but action is better than waiting for perfection sometimes. One of the things that I loved about John Curtis when I interviewed him is he had this policy. This is when he was the Provo mayor, but when people would send him an email or some sort of complaint, he would right then record a 20 to 45-second video saying, I heard you, this is kind of something I'm going to work on, or maybe check out this link, thanks, bye-bye. And he never re-recorded them. It was just like, you know, if it's 80% good, we're moving on it. And I know that's hard when one misstep can be so skewed. And so, you know, you want it to be so good, but I think having a priority for action, especially with this short time frame, is maybe better than trying to figure out a perfect plan for every platform and waiting too long to try and implement it.
That's great counsel. Because I think about how do I cut through the chaos? You know, how do I not contribute to it? And it is normal for your brain to go to this place of, I can't believe I just said it that way. Can I do it again? Or I can see that like used against me potentially out of context, and that could be really harmful. Claudia, let me ask you, have you seen some political leaders do a better job of cutting through the chaos and communicating? Who are the, give me, if you could, share examples with me of people anytime in history that you've known that have done a good job of communicating, leaders that you think are effective.
Well, so the first person that comes to mind was Governor Cox, former lieutenant governor, who I had the opportunity to work with, and he was very supportive of my youth summit. And as a speaker, and this is a segment of our population, a rather large percentage of Utah's population, he connected with youth, and it was very visible. He was speaking at one of the summits, and he was relating stories about himself, and he was talking to them as if he was talking to each one of them individually. And I watched the audience, and they were all listening and all, I mean, hanging on every word he was saying. Yeah. But, and I know that he's talked about this in different settings. So I'll mention that he brought up the fact that as a young boy, he was bullied. And that was very traumatic for him. And he literally had some of the kids in the audience, they were very tearful, they were crying. And so he got to them, he touched them. And so that's what I believe leaders can and should do. And Ally, I've had the opportunity to work with you, so I do know that you do listen. And I've always appreciated that. As Ally's PIO, I always used to say, I'm your PIO.
Yes, you did.
Still am. But I agree, actually, Ken was the one who brought this up in listening. And I do believe that Ally is very, very good at listening. And I do believe that people know that. But you know, leaders, when I talk with people in the community, friends, relatives, they all have a resounding thought, and we talk about it sometimes, and everyone kind of says, you know, well, I wonder what so-and-so is doing in Washington, D.C. What are they doing for us? Well, I think that's the strongest message that any leader should listen to, because any community, not just the ethnic community, but any community in Utah, rural, urban, youth, senior, what will Ally do for me? And I think that's critical to get that message.
They want to feel like it's relevant, personal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Personal. That's what I was trying to say with Governor Cox.
Yeah, he's a great
Anything
example of
personal.
that.
Yeah.
He's a great example.
Yes.
Paul, I know you wanted to add something. You had your hand raised and you had wanted to add something when we were talking about the challenge of being real
Well,
and connecting back.
Well, I'd like to maybe answer the question that you just posed to the previous
Please.
guest, and that is who was good at transparency and who was good at communicating and that sort of thing. You talk about how you're going around the state meeting with people. That might be the way to do it. That's how I believe Spencer Cox won the primary, because he did that. He started like a year out. And I remember I've got a cabin in Torrey, and we were staying down there. And
So beautiful.
We saw something on the bulletin board at the town store that Spencer Cox was having a meeting at this restaurant. So we all went over to that. He did that all over the state. And I think that's probably why he won, because he was able to lay that foundation and talk directly to people. From town to town. Wayne Owens did that back in 1972. Nobody ever heard of him, and he walked the state of Utah and upset the Republican incumbent for Congress in 72. But there needs to be a way to incentivize public office holders being transparent. And right now there is no incentive for that. I've been watching our elected officials get more and more secretive or more aloof to communicating with the public. I can't tell you how many times I've seen in the Tribune a story about something that I'll say Mike Lee was doing, and then there's always a sentence in there, Senator Lee did not respond to the Tribune's question about this event or this issue. And I mean, I see that all the time. So-and-so didn't respond, so-and-so didn't respond. There's no incentive for them to respond because they keep getting elected anyway. Once you're an incumbent in Utah and you're a Republican, it's very, very difficult for you to lose. It's too bad. And it's too bad that they think this way, but it seems that they think there's no reason to, put themselves out there and get into a dialogue when all they have to do is get on the, Fox News or whatever, and the echo chamber, and nobody will ask them a tough question or challenge them on anything. And then, you never see those guys. You'll never see, hardly ever, a Republican go on MSNBC or a Democrat go on Fox News. So there needs to be a way to incentivize them to be transparent. Let me just say one more example. Senator Bob Bennett was very transparent when I was, covering, what he was doing, and he not only, a lot of, and it's a good, effective way to do it is to have a good press secretary or public relations person who will, communicate with the press or whoever, and do it in an honest way. Bennett would return my call himself and give me as much time as I wanted to explain his positions to me, and it helped me write a better story, a fuller story, and it helped him get his message across rather than just this line that says so and so did not respond, did not comment. So, but as long as they can keep doing that and keep winning elections, we're going to continue in this morass.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. And I'm hoping the election is an opportunity to to hold leaders accountable. And I couldn't agree more that I think it's important that they be transparent and accessible. Leigh, and then Laurie, and then Jeanette, you all had something to offer.
Yeah, quickly, when I think of a politician who has been the most transparent and who I feel like truly represents me, it's actually my local school board member. And they are the most active person who I've ever seen on social media. And they're responding to questions, and even people outside of their district, they're answering questions to. But the biggest thing I think with that is, if you are going to open yourself up and say, look, ask me questions on social media, I will help you, you've got to set some boundaries too, because it could take a toll on it. It'll take over your whole life. And so saying, I will only respond at these times, or I'm going to go take care of my kids and go to their soccer game tonight, so I'm going to tune out of social, because I've seen how this school board member has been so engaging. I've seen it take a toll on his personal life. And so rely on help, trust your team, empower your team to speak for you when needed, but also like speak directly to them, because that transparency and that connection with your audience is so essential.
Yeah, great points. Laurie, you had something to add?
Have to unmute me. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, these are really great thoughts. And I think what is emerging here is the pattern that you established that you need to follow, because you mentioned I have to hire a great big communication team. No, that would be a big mistake, because the opinion leaders that people listen to are not the ones that you hire. They're
That's a great point.
They're the people who believe in you, that have a voice in different channels, and you have to pick the channels that are the ones that will help you do the best job, and also frankly help you get elected. But when you talk about the grassroots efforts with communities across Utah, what you're talking about, the people who come to those meetings, the people who came to hear Spencer Cox in his little restaurant meetings, were the opinion leaders. Rank and file people don't come. Opinion leaders come, and then they pass that message on to other people. Other people will listen to those opinion leaders because they take the time to become informed. And if you're listening to those people, then you're going to earn their trust. And I think it was Paul who said that's exactly how Spencer Cox got elected, because there was a lot of money that came against him at the last minute, but he still got elected because he listened to people, and those people that he listened to were opinion leaders who then passed that message on to others. That's where your strength will be, and it is a grassroots thing. It builds trust. People will trust you if those are the kinds of things that you do. If you listen to them, and your actions then follow what they have said, then those people will trust you in spite of what anybody else has to say, what any other media has to say, what any other candidate has to say, because you will be authentic and they will be phony.
Thanks for making that point. I appreciate that, Laurie. Jeanette?
I want to retweet everything that people have been saying. This is a good discussion and important topics. And like Paul said, when people don't give a comment, when they say no comment or can't be reached for comment, that's lame. People don't want that, and in today's day and age, no one's unavailable for comment. I mean, everyone is a text away. So, and that's something I think that comes naturally to you to want to communicate. I've loved it when my elected officials have reached out to me in various technology ways with texts or Google Forms or something, and they survey me on. I got some recently from my state representatives about how I feel about the death penalty, tax cuts versus, investing in transportation, or just the different things. And it does two main things for me when I hear from them with those questions. I feel like, oh, my voice can be heard, and I think through this topic and send back my opinion easily on this survey platform. But also it gives me an idea what is in this person's head right now. What are they wrestling with? What are they forced to vote on this week? And it gives me some empathy for them, and it makes me want to support them more, because I realize these are hard decisions. It's not like they're these are so black and white. It's obvious to everybody what should be done. There's layers, and so it helps me have empathy and support and just be inspired by what they're tackling. And so I think that's a great way. And with technology, you can be pretty strategic with that without it taking over your life. I also agreed with Leigh on boundaries. You can't have a 24/7 press conference, on Twitter and Facebook. That will wear you out and eat you alive. But like Leigh said, if you did have every Thursday night from 4 to 6 or something, I will answer as many questions as possible, and people could come to rely on that and see your personality through your commenting, whether you do it by responding back or videos or Instagram lives or whatever you do. But you can't do it all the time, or it's too much.
No, and then it starts to sound like you're just producing a show instead of
And not
getting
actually
the work done.
getting the work done.
Yeah, let's get the work done. And I think there's a balance point. I want to shift gears just a little bit, because part of what's compelling me to pursue this nomination is a concern for the future, a concern for the world we're leaving our children and our grandchildren. When I think about the deficit, the environment, the quality of life, affordable housing, affordable childcare, there's so many things that are pressing on, especially younger people in our communities right now. And we also know they're not engaging in the same ways, although they did show up in historic numbers in the last presidential election. They don't remain engaged. And even then, it's not as high as you wish it would be. There's still a need to continue to engage them. And I'm wrestling with, people are like, you've got to be on TikTok. And you might notice we're not on TikTok because I can't bring myself to dance on TikTok. Like, in my head is this stereotype about TikTok. We're figuring out how to use that platform better. I know there are good ways to do it. So if you want to volunteer and help me there, I could use the help. But how do we engage younger people in ways that resonate with them? How do we help them into a broader conversation? My concern is people tell me, have a conversation with older generations here, have a conversation with the younger people here. And then I worry it's not communal, like we're missing something about the dialogue across generations when we're on different platforms. So what advice do you have for me in terms of political engagement and inviting the next generation into the dialogue? Because I think the Republican brand may be a little bit damaged with these younger folks, and they assume Republicans are a certain kind of stereotype. And I reject a lot of that. And I want to reclaim the basic principles that we're founded on as a party. So how do I invite them back to the dialogue? Ken, would you take a stab at that one?
I would encourage you to consider something quite important. Young people are not lost during the campaign. Young people are lost by what transpires after the campaign, where their hopes, dreams, wants, and needs are ignored because they get sucked down into the black hole of Washington, D.C., and paralytic forces keep us from achieving anything that gives sustained opportunity for the young generation. So if you want to turn that around, you look at the last 4 presidential elections, each one of them, to a certain degree, mobilized young voters 18 to 29 in impressive fashion. And then those 18 to 29, I don't want to talk too broadly, but a lot of them had their hearts broken. 4 presidential elections in a row, party to party to party to party. And 20 years later, they're saying nothing changed. I carried my behind off when I was 18. Now I'm 38, and I'm still facing the same issues. So again, systemically, we're talking about what we do after the election as being the true litmus test of how we serve and embrace and include the younger generation.
It's a great point. Really great point. Anybody want to add to that? Mr. Raleigh?
Well, yeah, I mean, Ken makes some great points. How do you reach those people? I don't know, but let me just, I'll bring this up. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has started online newsletter that's actually a subscription, although you don't have to pay. I mean, he asks the people for, to pay a donation, but you can subscribe and not pay. And then that's how he kind of controls or knows, he sends out emails when he's got something to say, and he's got something to say quite a bit. His latest foray was talking about how John Stockton and Aaron Rodgers are facilitating the dumb jock stereotype by the nonsense they're saying about vaccines. But he's gotten a really great following. And the thing that's great about it is people can come and they can critique him. They can answer. And whenever he has something to say, he puts out this mass email, and then people read it and comment and critique him, and they can have a dialogue that way. Maybe that's one way to go, because the current, media environment is not working very well.
Yeah. I have wondered, because he's taking it directly to them, right? And so they're getting him unfiltered, undiluted. It's pretty pure.
Exactly, and he's done it by a newsletter, and he's. But the thing that's good about what he does is he doesn't lecture. I mean, he says, these are my thoughts, and then people can comment and agree with him or disagree with him and have a respectful dialogue. He's not a politician, but he's definitely an influence maker, I believe. And it might be a model that elected officials ought to follow. The problem is, like I said before, what's the incentive for them to do that if they can, stay non-transparent and still win their elections?
Yeah. Great points. Okay, as we wrap up, I have assembled you all because of my tremendous respect for you as professionals, as humans, as Utahns. I have tremendous confidence in the way your brains and hearts work. So I want to just get really personal here for a minute and ask you each to take 60 to 90 seconds and give me your best advice. What is the one thing you want to counsel the next senator from the state of Utah to do? And it doesn't have to be related to communication, but I'm really interested to know, if you were to give me one critical piece of advice, could you crystallize that down and just share that with me right now? I'm really interested in understanding better what you think is most important for me to understand. Ken, could I ask you to go first?
Yeah, it's pretty simple from my standpoint. Stylistically, avoid the arrogance of being the smartest person in the room. Specifically in this race, in 2022, you are matching up against an individual who constantly presents himself in every public setting that he speaks out in as the smartest person in that room, to tell people what they should know because of his intellect defining the situation. Changing that into a person who reflects on what they've heard, what they've been shown, what they've come to understand by being attentive to the needs, expressions, and unmet dreams of others, and crystallizing those makes a far more effective speaker, because your message is empathetic and it resonates with those people who sit on the fence.
Yeah, that's great counsel. So I'm known for my Post-it note addiction, and I'm just going to write all of your counsel on Post-its and put it across my desk today for posterity's sake, but also for personal study. So Leigh, what's your counsel for me?
I have Post-its all over my desk as well.
It's a problem. If you could just see, it's just a problem.
I think the number one thing, and we talked about this earlier, is to listen. I think too often we see politicians come in and they have, this is my platform, this is what I'm going to do, and be open to listen to what your constituency thinks and what they want, and be open to listen to the opposing viewpoints, because sometimes, even though you might not change your vote completely, but you might change something small, because really you're there to represent the people, and listening to everything they have to say and trying to reach them. And don't just live in that echo chamber like the people, frankly, you're trying to reach are living in. Try to live in a place where you're always listening.
It's great counsel. Thank you very much. Jeanette, what's your counsel for me?
Mine is similar to Leigh's in that, and you alluded to it early on, you don't just want to communicate to potential voters and your constituents, but also you want it to be a two-way communication. That's so rare. That's unheard of. You know, we feel so unheard and like our thoughts aren't solicited. But if you create and continue to create, because you already are doing this, a way for us to give our thoughts and ideas to you, it could even be as rudimentary as some polls on Instagram. You know, if with the surplus of funds, do you value transportation or education? You know, just a way for people to tap in and share some of their thoughts. They'll feel heard. And sometimes just being heard is what makes people like you, even if you don't say much, but you've heard them and acknowledged their voices. They feel like you're brilliant, just for listening to them. So I think that's the biggest thing, is creating an environment, which you've already done, but continue to do that, where it is a conversation, not a one-way campaign of shoving yourself down people's throats. But hey, I want to represent you, so I need to know what you think. That's imperative for me to represent you. And so that would be my best advice.
Yeah, it's great counsel. Claudia, what's your counsel for me?
So I am going to repeat what everybody has been saying, and I think listening is critical. I also would just like to say, stay who you are, Ally, as a person. Continue to be who you are, compassionate, transparent, always just laying it on the line. I think sometimes that can get lost in all the hustle bustle of what's going on, but I think that will come through very strong. And one other piece of advice here: put on those red shoes. And if somebody wants you to dance and be on TikTok, join them and dance.
Okay. Got it. I'm gonna have to learn to moonwalk or something good, because I dance like in junior high still, or maybe somebody could work with me a little. I like it. Okay. Laurie, what's your counsel for me?
I would echo what people have said, but I'd go a little bit further. Do not exacerbate the divisiveness that we see. That, in my mind, that divisiveness is causing more pain and agony in America than anything. We are just so divided on everything, and we are so entrenched in our opinions that we do not listen or care for anyone else. And we've lost the art of compromise. The listening isn't just to your constituents, it's to, if you're back in the Senate, you listen to the other voices in the Senate and you strive for compromise. You strive to, because we don't get so much of what has not been done has been because nobody's willing to compromise. You're not going to get everything that you want, but if you can get some of the things you want by giving somebody else some of the things they want, then we've all won.
Yes, great counsel. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Raleigh, you want to close us up? What counsel do you have for me? And I have to tell you, there are days when I see things happen in Utah and I think, I miss Paul Raleigh. He'd have something really great to say about this today.
I would say the most effective thing for you to do right now is what you said you've been doing, and that is going around the state and meeting people one-on-one. It's very difficult to get, through all the haze of the social media and the fighting different media organizations that are, have their own agendas. But if you can meet people face to face and one-on-one, and like I said, that's what Spencer Cox did. He did it for a year and built up his base and go from town to town. I mean, even in his little town, Torrey, that I was in, he spent 3 or 4 hours down there, and he was going all around the state. And then follow it up, when you're there, and if you can find a venue, a restaurant, a cafe, a library, or anything, and then get the word out that you're going to be there. And these little towns, it's people all over. They come to those things, and then just have your dialogue. Tell them what you're trying to do, and listen to them. And then while you're there, get their emails. Get as many emails as you can, and follow up. With the meetings that you've had. And then follow up with them about what you've thought about what they said and what you're intending to do.
Yeah, I've loved the walks I've had in these 73 communities because it puts a face on these issues. It's no longer just an antiseptic issue position. It's more like, I know the Utahns this impacts, and I know their stories, and it makes it real. It brings it home. I really appreciate your insights, because this is something that I wrestle with dramatically. And some people thought this is a sort of fluffy first thing for your first principle in a policy initiative. But honestly, I actually think it's critical and fundamental to every other conversation we're going to have about policy. And as I've been speaking with different subject matter experts and figuring out different nuances and solutions that are in the landscape, and I ask them, what's the greatest threat to our success on this front? Most of them come back to the fact that we can't talk together. To Laurie's point about the divisiveness, that we've stopped having useful dialogue, even when we disagree. And we've started labeling and marginalizing and inviting people to the polar opposites of where the conversation needs to be. And we've got to start by inviting people back to the table. So that's something I've tried to do throughout my career, and something I hope to take to Washington, D.C., is the ability to invite people to the dialogue. And this is my conversation today with you, is how do I ensure that people of Utah feel invited to the dialogue? How do I make sure I maintain as much proximity as possible, to be as close as possible and in tune with what's happening in their lives, so that I can understand what the solutions need to be on behalf of the people of Utah? So you've all helped me advance my thinking in this today. Thank you for sharing your insights. And I really appreciate and adore every one of you. I just wish I could see you in person right now and give you a big hug. So we'll have to invite you to a future Ally rally, and I'll put my arms around you then. But as long as this virus is keeping us remote, I hope you all stay well and healthy and safe. And I just wish you the best. Thanks again for coming today.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Okay, we'll see you all. Bye-bye.